friends, it's time to get started on our job. One of the first things you want to do is safely raise and support the rear of the vehicle so the wheels are off the ground. After that, we're going to remove all 5 of our 19mm lug nuts and then the wheel. All right, now to be able to have access to removing the wheel bearing, we're going to have to go ahead and remove the brakes. Let's start by removing our caliper bracket bolts. You're going to find one 19mm headed bolt down here, and the other one's going to be located up a little higher. I'm going to start by loosening this one. We'll get it so it's almost out of here, and then we'll go ahead and remove the other one fully. Now let's go ahead and use a pry bar. We're going to carefully get in between the caliper and the rotor and gently start prying this away. All right, let's go ahead and carefully set this aside. Remove your rotor. Next, we're going to continue on to using a 32mm socket to remove our axle nut. If you're doing this on the ground with a ratchet, you might find that this is going to want to spin. If that's the case, just take a nice pry bar and carefully go in between the studs all the way down to the ground to prevent this from spinning. The next thing that we're going to want to do is take a nice hammer and punch. We're going to go ahead and break the axle free from the wheel bearing. We'll come right into the center area here, give it a couple loving bonks, make sure it's free. Now the next thing that we're going to start doing is disconnecting the ABS wire. That's going to be located all the way up inside the wheel well right here, and you can find the connector. Now generally on this, you're just going to go ahead and squeeze on this tab, and then you can go ahead and pull on this black area here to separate the two. If you have a hard time separating it because it's kind of hard to squeeze, I'm just going to go ahead and pop this right out of the body of the vehicle. Now you can see the squeeze tab. Go ahead and give that a little squeeze, separate the two. I always like to inspect my wiring, make sure I don't see any funny colors. If I do, it's corrosion and it needs to be dealt with. This looks fine, so I can go ahead and set this aside. Now we're going to move along to some mounting points for this ABS wire. As you follow it down, you're going to find that it has one 13mm headed bolt right here. And then as you were to continue, you would find that you have another one located on this aspect of the control arm over here. Let's remove the pair. All right, now we can follow that wire up a little higher. You're going to find a plastic connector right here. Go ahead and pop that free as well. Just carefully get in between this area. Separate that. Follow it up along here. You're just going to pop that right out of there. Now let's have a look from the back side of the knuckle area. You can see where the axle is going to go in and through the knuckle and into the wheel bearing. Looking inside this area right here, you can see one 16mm headed bolt right there. There's another one a little further up. Over here diagonally, there's another one, and there's a fourth right up in that corner. We're going to go ahead and remove all 4. All right, that one's nice and loose. Let's do the same to the rest. Okay, I've got all the bolts nice and loose. Let's continue on the outer portion here. We'll knock that wheel bearing free from the knuckle. Looking inside this area here, you can see exactly where the bearing bolts up against this backing plate and then right up against the knuckle itself. So I'm just going to go ahead and use my hammer. I'm going to give this a couple loving bonks in this direction to try to break it free. Just keep in mind there's nothing really holding this on here. If you wanted to, for safety, you can go ahead and use your axle nut. We'll just go ahead and start this on here, just a couple threads, just in case this breaks free. It won't come off and hurt you. All right, I got that off of there. I'll go ahead and take off this nut. Now we're going to hold on to the backing plate and the bearing at the same time, start removing them from the vehicle. Lift the ABS wire up and through the backing plate. And there it is, friends. All right, so now that we have the bearing out of there, let's talk about the axle and the knuckle. For the knuckle itself, we have to be able to prepare this for our brand new wheel bearing. So you're going to want to make sure that you clean out any of the dirt or debris or rust or anything inside here. Just go ahead and scrape it right down. After that, we'll brush it out, and then we're going to go ahead and spray on a tiny bit of copper Never Sees. Before we put on the Never Sees, though, we also want to pay attention to this area along here, where the base of the bearing is supposed to press up against. go ahead and clean that up with some sort of disc or sandpaper or something the like. Basically, it just has to be smooth and clean of any debris. Aside from that, we also have the axle up along here where it connects onto the bearing. Make sure that's clean, and of course the splines. Now let's go ahead and reach from the backside here. We're going to gently push the bolts through and apply some red thread locker to the mounting bolts threads. The next thing I always like to do is clean up the mounting areas where the bearing's going to ride and the backside of the backing plate that's going to be up against the knuckle. Okay, now it's time to get ready to install our brand new wheel bearing. Let's go ahead and take that ABS wire. We're going to bring it right down and through this backing plate. Now looking through the backside, you can see exactly where the ABS wire needs to line up with. Line up all of your bolt holes. Now let's get this in position up against the knuckle. Just carefully slide it right onto that axle. Okay, let's get this in here. Now I'm going to reach from the inside. I'm going to try to start all 4 of my mounting bolts. Essentially, just going to get it in there, make sure it's kind of starting, do the same to all. Now that I have all 4 of my mounting bolts started, let's go ahead and bottom them out, and then we're going to torque these to 40 foot-pounds. Go ahead and start that mounting bolt in there. Bring the wire over to the other mounting point. Go ahead and start in that mounting bolt as well. Once both of your mounting bolts are started, snug them up. All right, that one's nice and tight. Let's do the same to the other. Now let's go ahead and connect in our ABS wire connector here. Listen for a click. There it is. I'm going to give it a little tug to make sure it's secure. Now we can mount this up in its position up along the body. Press it right in there so it's secure. We also have this locking tab which holds the ABS wire to the other ABS wire right up along here. Line that up, lock it in. Make sure there isn't too much slack along this area here so it's going to get caught on anything. Now up along this area you can see we have another point. Let's go ahead and get this on there. Now we've got this mounting point right here. Let's go ahead and put this into position, lock it down. Up along the top of the control arm here, we'll slide this right in. And now let's come to the front, in front of the backing plate over here. We can go ahead and press this right into position. All right, now let's just have a peek, double check to make sure it's completely secured so we can move along. Now it's going to be time to get ready to install our rotor, but first we have to prepare it first. We want to go ahead and clean up the outer aspect along here where the wheel is supposed to ride, and then of course along the back side as well. This is going to be the area that rides up against the bearing, so it needs to be clean and free of any debris. Once your rotor's clean, let's move along to prepping the surface of the wheel bearing. We're just going to use some copper never sees on this. And now let's grab our rotor. Take one of your lug nuts. We're just going to start it on here to hold the rotor for us. Now let's go ahead and get our caliper on here. We're just going to go ahead and slide those brake pads right over our brake rotor. Next, let's go ahead and take our 2 caliper bracket mounting bolts. We're going to make sure the threading's clean and add a little bit of red thread locker to each. Go ahead and start both of these in here. After that, we'll bottom them out and then we'll torque these to manufacturer's specifications. Let's torque these to 74 foot-pounds. Okay, next it's going to be time to put on our axle nut. I always like to use a little bit of red thread locker right on the threads of the axle. Something that I'm going to mention is it's always a good idea to use a brand new axle nut. If you don't have one, you need to make sure that you use that red thread locker. Let's go ahead and put this on here. We're going to bottom it out and then we're going to torque this to 181 foot-pounds. To be able to torque your axle nut, it's going to be easiest with your vehicle closer to the ground. We're going to go ahead and take a nice long pry bar, bring it across some of these lug studs and all the way down to the ground. That's going to prevent this from spinning, and now we can torque this to that 181 foot-pounds. Let's go ahead and get this lug nut off of here. Let's go ahead and get the wheel on here. We're going to start on all 5 of our lug nuts. We'll bottom them out, get the wheel back on the ground, and then we're going to torque each of these in a crisscross manner to 100 foot-pounds. Torqued. Okay friends, we got our wheel bearing in there. What's left to do now? Now you're going to want to go ahead and hop inside the passenger compartment and pump up that brake pedal until it's nice and firm. After that, go ahead and take it for a road test, make sure you don't have an ABS light, and get yourself safely down to your local alignment shop. Thanks for watching.